There was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the wedding. When the wine ran short, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, how does your concern affect me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servers, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for Jewish ceremonial washings, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told them, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Draw some out now and take it to the head waiter." So they took it, and when the head waiter tasted the water that had become wine, without knowing where it came from, although the servers who had drawn the water knew, the head waiter called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves good wine first, and then when people have drunk freely, an inferior one. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this as the beginning of his signs at Cana in Galilee, and so revealed his glory, and his disciples began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord. I'd like to say that this past summer, when we set the calendar for our pre-Cana formation, we were intentional to tie our first mini-retreat with these readings. But I can't claim credit for that. I have to give credit to God, who himself orchestrates all things and weaves them together for our good. How delighted I am, of course, to hear that great passage of the sign that showed forth at Cana in Galilee. The revelation of Christ's glory, the revelation of the providence and provision of God, which we, as we settle back into ordinary time, the ordinary time of the year, we are marveled and dazzled at God's goodness. So this is just another example. It happens all the time as a priest, by the way, that our best laid plans are even better than we thought, because God is so good. I do want to just welcome once again the pre-Cana couples who are here engaged to be married in this coming calendar year. I also want to welcome a number of the mentor couples who are here. Certainly many others who are invested in supporting marriage in different roles, wedding coordinators. I want to thank Elizabeth Brown, who is our marriage formation coordinator, for her presence, and perhaps some of the other speakers for today's mini-retreat are present as well. But it is an important thing. And St. John Paul II, one of our beloved popes here at Holy Cross in particular, but throughout the church, St. John Paul II, he famously said that as the family goes, so goes the world. And it reminds us that whether we're married or not, and I myself am not, don't intend to be married, and yet I understand that the future stake of the world is tied to the strength of marriage, tied to the strength of family life. As the family goes, so goes the world, said John Paul II. And I don't want to so identify family life with marriage as if to say that they're exactly the same thing. We certainly know that there are families that are formed in other ways, or maybe without marriage always being present. And I know our world is increasingly trying to prove that there are families that come in all different types and ways and shapes. But I do know that at the heart of what makes a family is God's intention for marriage. And I think that the state of the world so desperately depends upon rediscovering the meaning and the gift of marriage. And that's why, as a parish, we're doing so much to lift up marriage, to form and prepare couples for the serious task of marriage, to encourage couples who are married to go deeper into marriage. Because marriage is a great task. It is a great burden. It is a great challenge. And yet, without marriage, the world may never know who God is. I think that's what John Paul was really saying, if you ask me. As the world goes, as the family goes, so goes the world. What he's effectively saying is, if we lose sight of what marriage is, if we lose sight of what family life is, we will not be able to understand or perceive the reality of God. And that, my friends, is a great and troubling fact. That if marriage is in crisis, our knowledge about who God is falls into crisis as well. And I would suggest that marriage is in crisis today for all sorts of reasons, many of which we know quite well, even trying to live marriage. Marriage is hard, especially in the modern world. And yet without marriage, we will lose track of God, because marriage reveals God's glory. That's what we were told at the end of the wedding feast at Cana, that this was a revelation of Christ's glory. And it was when they saw what happened at that wedding feast, not only the wine that came forth from those ceremonial washing jars, but when they saw the sign of marriage and Christ's presence there blessing it, the disciples began to believe. I believe that our world can be brought back to a knowledge of God through holy marriages. And that's why we are dedicated and investing in building up these couples so that they can live to the best of their ability the holy marriages to which God calls them. Let's start with the first reading from Isaiah. You shall be called by a new name, pronounced by the mouth of the Lord. One of the great privileges of marriage is to be one of the first people to encounter the couple just after the marriage nuptial mass is celebrated. And it's a beautiful thing. I walk out to the vestibule area, and about 15 times a year I'm privileged to stand with a couple as they sign the marriage license. Now, the marriage license isn't the heart of marriage, but civilly it makes a difference, right? And that certificate is a very important thing. It changes things. But one of the great delights that I have as a priest is to witness the giddiness, especially of the bride, as she picks up the pen and says, I've got to sign my new name. It's an interesting thing. Not every woman takes on a new name, but I would say whether the new name is taken on or not, marriage changes the couple, because never before have they been the way that they are presented at the end of the marriage. There is something new, and it reminds me of what God says in Isaiah, you shall be called by a new name, pronounced by the mouth of the Lord. And when I announce a couple at the end of a wedding, I'm sure they're glad that it's not the voice of God with a megaphone that says, I now present to you Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. But I will be very clear to say that as a priest, that little introduction reminds me that in marriage, there is a new creation. There's a new reality that did not exist before. No longer how long a couple has been together, no matter how long that engagement has been. Even if a couple has been civilly married before, there's something new that happens in the sacramental blessing of that marriage. That's what we call a convalidation or a marriage blessing. And I am always struck, and the signing of the name is just one little sign or symbol of it, that what happens in marriage is a great newness. To pick up the pen and realize that my identity has changed, and that I have been given a new reality, a new identity in marriage, in relation to another. I'm no longer alone, but I've been drawn together as a new thing, a new creature, together with my spouse. So that's the first thing, the newness of marriage, the newness of that marriage reality. By the way, that was carried through in the Psalm 96, so beautifully chanted. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all you lands. Sing to the Lord and bless his name. The newness of marriage. One of my favorite things during a wedding is sitting right in that chair and realizing that the couple sitting right here, I like to be able to keep a good eye on them, but they're able to join in their marriage liturgy, singing a new song to the Lord. Usually because they've never sat that close, but also because there's a kind of seriousness of that liturgy. People are paying a little more attention than they normally do during Mass. It's a great thing to be able to witness. It's one of the reasons, actually, as we come to today's Mass, I was very glad we were singing a new song in the form of a new Gloria. We've never sung, at least formally, that Gloria setting here in the parish. If it wasn't familiar, it was maybe to catch your attention and say, there's something new in the air. There is a joy in a newness of what is possible, especially as we ponder the meaning of marriage. Worship the Lord in holy attire. Tremble before him, all the earth. I know that couples very often are trembling on the day of their wedding as they come to the altar. They're much more nervous than I am, having done this a lot of times. When I did my first wedding, I was nervous. Now I'm not so nervous anymore. But that trembling before him is something that I get to see. It always brings me delight, especially to see the grooms tremble before that awesome, awesome reality. But I want to just focus in for a moment on that image of worshiping the Lord in holy attire. Because isn't that something that makes a wedding as well? Not only the couple, but everyone comes with a kind of special set of clothes. Isn't that a remarkable thing that we don't just wear normal clothes to a wedding? We all are attired in holy attire for that great and solemn moment. I heard about a couple, they're here today, I'm not going to single them out, but they're going to be married in November. They were engaged just a few weeks ago, and within about a week or two of the engagement, the groom was already reporting to the suit shop to get fitted and sized for his suit. Now to me, that's a sign that what he's going to wear on that day is quite important. That's like almost a year in advance of trying on the suit. But it's a great reminder that as a couple comes, they must indeed not only clothe themselves with the exterior garments that make them a marriage couple, a bride and a groom, but there's an interior work to clothe them and to make them ready so that that trembling is not a trembling out of fear, but a trembling out of anticipation and delight of being drawn into that great sacrament. I want to point to the second reading. I know I'm probably going to go on too long, and the couples, I'm sorry to say, who are here for the mini retreat, you'll have to listen to me again, and I teach down there. But I think it's good that the whole parish wakes up to this reality of marriage because, again, the state of the world depends on the state of marriage. That as the family goes, so goes the world. And we'll lose sight of God if we lose sight of the meaning of marriage. What's at the heart of the second reading? It's the idea of the radical vision of complementarity. That we, my brothers and sisters, all of us who are here, diverse as we be, from different cultures and backgrounds and socioeconomic statuses, with different skills and different life experiences, we are stronger together. And that diversity of roles that Paul speaks about in 1 Corinthians is perhaps nowhere on greater display than in a marriage, where you bring two people who are totally unlike each other into a vivid relationship where they become radically complementary. It's an amazing thing that we're made to serve together, not all alike. Some people miss this point, that in Catholicism, we're not all alike. And that's the strength of the church. That old image, here comes everyone, this global faith, this universal faith, that as St. Paul spoke about, with many, many gifts given each by God. And thanks be to God for those gifts. You know about the four temperaments, the sanguine, the choleric, the melancholic, and the phlegmatic. Isn't it good that we're not all the same? Wouldn't it be a horrible world if we were? And that's at the heart of every marriage, this idea of two who are different, brought into living relationship. And it's an amazing thing what happens when that takes place. Very often, by God's blessing, we see fertility, fruitfulness, new life can flow forth from that sexual difference and that complementarity of two who are quite different and yet are brought into relationship. And that's what the whole church is meant to be. Not all being the exact same. What a boring world it would be. But all of us brought with our various differences, learning from that radical vision of complementarity, which is what makes a marriage. Now, I know couples have to have certain things in common, right? Otherwise, they could probably never come together. But indeed, it's precisely the difference that makes that couple something beautiful. I use the image over and over. Peter Kreeft loved the image. Why do we love the coast where the water meets the rock? It's because the water and the rock are so unlike each other, but when they're together, what a beautiful thing it is. And what a marvelous thing it is to see that wonderful relationship coming together. Now finally we come to the gospel. Save the best for last. The best wine for now. It's a great reminder. There are many details in this passage, but one that I love is this idea of the hungry crowd pressing in. The hungry crowd that's there to celebrate the wedding feast. I'm sure some of the couples are glad to know that their marriage feast will only last a few hours, several hours. But in the ancient world, especially in the culture of the Holy Land, a marriage feast would often go on for days. And we're told that here on the first day of the wedding, the wine was already running short. Maybe it's a sign that more came than were invited. Maybe it's a sign that all their preparations and planning was missing a few details. But it certainly is a sign of the desire of the crowd to celebrate. And a hungry crowd gathered for a wedding feast can certainly do a lot of damage, can't they? They can eat a lot, they can drink a lot. And indeed, this is a great reminder of that desire that we innately have to celebrate. That's one reason why these couples have to sift their invitation lists and check them twice to make sure they're not inviting too many people, to make sure that they don't run out of anything. But it's also a reminder of that great desire we all have to be present at the wedding, to celebrate the wedding, to give thanks for what the wedding means, how it reveals God's love in the world. And I want to just point to the transformation. It's so obvious in this passage. The water becomes wine. Things are not what they seem. And that's true in marriage, in the church as well. That things are not just what they seem. Although it seems very ordinary, very natural, very much something that's universal in the world, this image of marriage between a man and woman. There is, my friends, in the gift of marriage, the gift of the sacrament of marriage, something even more profound. And it reminds us of this altar, and it reminds us that as Jesus first transformed water into wine, he would go on to do something even more extraordinary, to make wine into the very precious blood of his sacrifice upon the cross. And if we look at the cross, we see the model, the icon of what marriage looks like, a sacrificial love, a pouring out one's life for the other. And as the head waiter tastes the wine steward tastes the wine, what a beautiful image of the taste that we get of God's love in Holy Communion. The reason I spend so much time focusing on marriage is not because all of us are married or will be married. Some of us have been married. Maybe we've been widowed. Some of us have experienced the pain and suffering of a very difficult marriage or even a divorce or separation. Some of us aren't sure that we want to be married. Some of us, like myself, I bring a little diversity into the church, are celibate priests. And yet marriage matters for all of us. It doesn't matter who we are or what perspective we have of marriage. Because if we can't understand what marriage is, we won't really be able to see who God is and what his love is and what his fidelity is and what his sacrificial love is. So that's why marriage matters for all of us. That's why marriage matters for the whole sake of the world. That as the family goes, so goes the world. And as marriage goes, so goes our ability to see and to understand God's love. So we do pray for each of the couples who are here, that throughout the coming weeks and months, their hearts would be truly able to grow, to be transformed, so that they can truly be for us signs of God's great glory. I look forward to the weddings that will come in due course. I know some of them aren't rushing too far, but we've already got one as early as the 1st of February, so we got to get busy because there is much, much grace to be received, and the Lord has so much to reveal to the world through the sacrament of marriage.